So welcome everyone to HITEC Live. Bienvenidos. If you're new to HITEC Live, welcome. I'm Ivana, the Executive Director of HITEC. HITEC Live is a bi-monthly series where we bring together our Hispanic technology community together to connect, share, learn something new, and get to know each other a little bit better. So our sessions are informal conversations where we get to hear from our partners, such as Morgan Stanley and community members, on topics that touch on tech, leadership, D&I, and everything in between. Today, we are talking about entrepreneurship with our friends at Morgan Stanley, so I'm super excited. Before we jump in, a few housekeeping items. We'll have some time at the end for some Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to raise your little digital hand there when we open up for questions. Until then, please be sure to keep your mics muted. And as always, share your thoughts and comments on the chat. And then finally, as you all know, we have our networking session at the end of our conversation. So for those of you that have some time to continue chatting with your fellow HITECers, we'll be staying on for another 15, 20 minutes or so. So why don't we get started? This week's session, we are going to dive into the entrepreneur space. We're going to get a sneak peek at Morgan Stanley's in-house startup accelerator that promotes financial inclusion and provides access to capital for early stage technology and technology-enabled companies led by women and multicultural entrepreneurs. So this is an inclusive conversation for not only our entrepreneurs, but also our future entrepreneurs and those interested in investing and working in this space. So there's a little bit of something for everybody. I want to thank our partners at Morgan Stanley for sharing the work and impact that they are having in this space. So to start our round of introductions, let's first please welcome Alice Vilma, Managing Director and Co-Head of the Multicultural Client Strategy Group at Morgan Stanley. Alice leads Morgan Stanley's efforts to strengthen its connection to the multicultural business community through development and execution of commercial opportunities with corporate, government, institutional, individual clients. In 2017, Alice launched the firm's Multicultural Innovation Lab, which is an in-house accelerator that invests in and supports early stage tech and tech-enabled startups with diverse founders. Most recently, Alice established the firm's first early stage venture fund investing in tech and tech-enabled startups with founders of color and women in the Next Level Fund. And Alice has been with Morgan Stanley for 15 years and has had different roles within the firm, including equity, capital markets, and securitization. So bienvenida, Alice. Thank you for being here with us today. And to lead the discussion, please also welcome Ivana Estrada. She's the executive director at Morgan Stanley and senior product and delivery lead in institutional securities knowledge. Ivana is responsible for introducing innovative strategic products and solutions that enable business lines to increase client engagement and to create and distribute investment insights and services that enhance revenue. Ivana is also an alumni of HITEC's Emerging Executive Program, class of 2020, very proud. And she's a proud member of the HITEC community and also an advisor to startups and nonprofit organizations. Welcome, Ivana. Welcome, Alice. We're looking forward to this conversation. I hand it off to you, Ivana. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Viviana. First of all, we are, like Alice and myself, are so excited, and the entire Morgan Stanley crew is so excited to be here with each of you. It's going to be a very insightful conversation about the Multicultural Innovation Lab that we have at Morgan Stanley. But also, we really hope that you can take away some actionable ideas with you in terms of, like, if you're interested in learning about the space, if you want to contribute, mentor in this space, or invest in this space in terms of like early stage companies. So before we get started in the conversation, why don't we kick off with the video from our innovation lab from the voice of one of the founders. I think you need to put the video or the audio. I'm not hearing.
I think, Vivian, you need to get off Off mute.
Oh yeah, Viviana, are you playing it?
1 second. I will play it right now.
Viv, I'm trying to play it. I'm just having technical difficulties.
No worries. I'm going to try and take it over. All right. Let's see if I can get it on my end. Let's see if this works. Thanks for your patience, guys. All right. Do we hear that?
Yeah.
My experience with the Multicultural Lab, I was a little nervous in the beginning. You know, they don't play when it comes to diligence. You know, when in the beginning, when it was really filled with anxiety. Am I going to get in? Am I not going to get in? And they were really drilling down on all the details.
Application process was rigorous. We went through several rounds and several interviews and the due diligence and financial statements, and it's harder to get into this program than it is to get into Harvard.
And then once the program started, you quickly realize day one that there's going to be accountability, because the first meeting you have as part of your weekly meetings is goal setting.
It's a nerve-wracking meeting because it's like you're meeting with all these smart people at a table every Monday, and they're all zeroed in and focused on you. And so, and every detail of your company. What did you do this week? What revenue did you bring in?
I've really been able to share with them the good, bad, the ugly, and the super ugly. And they've been able to help me think through what makes sense in terms of next steps and plan in order to reach our goals.
Having people truly look at your business, offer advice, think about ways that you can conceptualize what you're doing. They really are invested in your success.
Everyone in the MCIL lab wakes up every day and thinks about how they can help me be successful. And that's a powerful thing.
The thing that surprised me the most was the amount of resources that we had access to. From introduction to executives, to HR, to classes and education on sales and marketing.
The access that we have to people in our industry who are really doing it and doing it well, who've raised several rounds and who've gone public, and having them available to you to either ask them questions or set up one-on-ones. I think that was the most surprising part.
Carla Harris has been a phenomenal mentor to us. She was able to give us advice about a deal that we lost, and then how to carry ourselves after that deal, how to respond to the client. We ended up winning that client back, and it was arguably one of the largest deals that we've ever done in the history of our company.
My mentor, she's made introductions and opened doors for me from a partnership corporate standpoint that I certainly didn't have before.
Being in the MCIL definitely boosted my confidence on how smart I am about the business that I'm running, which is really important for any founder, to be able to walk into any room or talk to any investor and know that you're the smartest person that can talk about this thing being your business.
All right, so wonderful. We'll send you a link to that video. So I know that there was a little bit of delay, but then we'll send you a link so you can also take a look at that. But Alice, I want to thank you so much for making the time to join the HITEC community today, and mainly be able to introduce to this community the wonderful work that your team is doing when it comes to the Multicultural Innovation Lab, but also the many other initiatives that your team is working on. So looking forward to this wonderful conversation.
So am I. So I can't wait. It just, looking at that video just makes me smile from ear to ear. So I can't wait to talk about this. One of my favorite subjects, Ivana, as you know.
Exactly. So wonderful. So why don't we start, Alice, share a little bit about you and your journey that led you to where you are today, and that led you to launch the Innovation Lab. I'm very curious to know what excites you the most about the work that you do.
Okay, well, I'll start with the back part, which is what excites me the most about the work that I do is that every day I have the ability to make an impact in someone's life, particularly through their companies, and the ability to be able to really influence outcomes because we're offering up and leveraging our platform to do so is extremely, extremely fulfilling. on top of that, I'm using a skill set that I picked up over an entire career of working on Wall Street. And so being able to use those skills in a way that really provides impact and touches lives directly with people who look like me is really, really, really fulfilling. So how did we get here? I'm from Miami, Florida. So the thought about Miami time was actually, the comment about Miami time made me chuckle. I was like, that is true. So sorry, here we are, Miami person doing Miami time.
I thought it was just me, Alice.
Not just you, Viviana. So I'm from Miami, went to the University of Miami, and I was going to become a corporate attorney. And so I studied finance so that I could have some background before becoming a corporate attorney. I had an internship at Morgan Stanley, and that literally changed the course of my career and potentially even my life, quite frankly. I started working here as an intern and then came back full time for 3 years. And I was doing, at the time, capital markets and securitization and then structured finance. So very structured focus. Went to work with one of our one of our clients and did corporate development there. Went and got an MBA, did investing at another firm, and then came back to the firm in 2009, also in securitization and capital markets. And then I did a management stint in the capital markets division, and then equity capital markets before this amazing opportunity came about. And I was really just doing my job: equity coverage, transportation, industrials, power and gas, utilities, and had an opportunity to join a team that was pretty open field. And how it was, the question really that we were trying to conquer was, how do we think about increasing our presence with the multicultural business community? How do we establish ourselves as a thought leader with respect to engaging productively with multicultural constituents? How do we identify, develop, and execute commercial opportunities in this space? Because the idea was, if you attack a space that's not being addressed, that really is a way to create alpha. So did some work, some research. We had some quick hits in terms of ad hoc deals that we took care of. We did a conference, and then started doing research. And then we started saying to ourselves, let's ask ourselves a deeper question as to why we don't interact with the business community in the way that we would like to. And on the one hand, we can say, because everybody's racist and sexist, and we can say that, but probably want to look into it a little bit more. And in doing so, we discovered what we deem as a market inefficiency, which is that parity, particularly in entrepreneurship, really exists at the very earliest stages. And so when we decide we want to start a company, we can do that as equally as any of our counterparts can do that. And it really becomes at that point when you're looking for financing to start and form your company and start to begin to grow, that the disparities that are historical that we do know about, wealth gap disparities, et cetera, do come into play. The first money typically that a business raises is from friends and family. And there has to be some level of wealth from those friends and family to invest $1 in a business that may never come back to them, and is more than likely they're never going to see that dollar again. With respect to the wealth gap, we understand that a lot of times that wealth is concentrated in the hands of folks who are not Black and brown. And then when you think about institutional capital that then follows on to friends and family, and there's angel capital, institutional capital, that also tends to fall away pretty quickly for founders of color and women. And we already know the stats. For every $1 that's invested in a white male, less than 10 cents is invested in a total of women, founders of color, especially Black and Hispanic, as well as Asian. So this problem is actually relatively large and quite ubiquitous. And so there was an opportunity then to be able to be part of the solution around helping to close this gap, helping to provide access, network access really. The cash is great, but quite frankly, it's the commodity. And then to provide platforms by which you can open up access to potential investors, clients, which is what these companies need at this stage, and anything else that could be helpful. So here was born the Innovation Lab in 2017. Invested in 5 companies, and we have grown that to total investments in over 50 companies, We've had some exciting exits. We've had some exciting fundraisers, and I'm sure we'll go into that, but that's a quick background.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alice. That is like a good, to your point, not only just looking into how can we make a difference in this community, but you're describing something that many times is taken as a trade-off when it comes to the commercial value and the commercial opportunity that we have in this space. It doesn't have to be a trade-off. It's really a combination of having an impact on the community, helping these different entrepreneurs who have so much talent and wonderful ideas, but also the money, or to your point, the revenue alpha that brings.
Yep.
So for the entrepreneurs or people who want to start their businesses or they already have them, what are like just some context as to like what would they face if they were to apply to Morgan Stanley's Innovation Lab? What is it really? If you can just tell us a little bit more about what it offers, what is in it for entrepreneurs, what they should expect about it.
Absolutely. So with the Multicultural Innovation Lab, we offer what we have deemed and coined capital, content, and connections. And so for companies that come into the program and are part of our program, we invest $250,000 in them. We give them, and that's the capital, we give them content in the form of a 5-month curriculum that really covers everything they would ever need as an entrepreneur. We call it standard custom because we do believe there are things that all entrepreneurs need to have, and there's a foundation that they need to have. But what we're really focused is making sure that they can achieve their business objectives and their goals, and that can differ from company to company, and we provide that. And then we also provide our connections in the form of potential client and investor connections to help them accelerate businesses, as well as leveraging the Morgan Stanley platform, including mentors from Morgan Stanley, and any type of help and support they would need, whether it's tech support, marketing support, obviously, again, network extensions, because that's what we do best, being in the relationship business. And so the entrepreneurs who apply get to access this global platform with incredible reach at a best-in-class level. And if nothing else, they see how there's large aspiration to where they could be going, and get the expertise of folks who have, for lack of a better term, been there, done that.
Wonderful. It's a 5-month program. Is that accurate?
It is a 5-month program, and we run it twice a year now, which is something that we've been very excited about that has come about over the last year. We continue to increase our effectiveness and reach into these communities. And so we've grown our platform from 10 companies a year to 20, and we do that in 2 cohorts that are 5 months.
Wonderful. And I know that you're in London. So in terms of like, where are these startups? I mean, do they have to be based in the US? Can they be located in South America? What is the criteria other than location, but the criteria in general in terms of where they need to be on their business and their plans and the revenues, et cetera, for them to qualify and apply to the program?
Ivana, thank you for shouting out London, because I'm so excited. Again, talking about the growth, I'm here because we just announced that we will be launching our Emea Multicultural Innovation Lab. So that is super exciting, and it allows us to find a more central place for the 15 to 20% of applications that we get at any given period that's not in the United States. And most of it is from London and the Emea area. And so we are so excited to begin to concentrate our efforts and use the platform of our London headquarters, which we do from the States, but now we can do it here in London. And so, quite frankly, it is a global lab. We accept applications from all over. We have seen applications from Central and South America. There was one that was this close, literally this close to getting in. It was a Mexican company, and it was very, very interesting last year. And so we have, we're from everywhere. Now, in terms of what you need to be able to come into the lab, companies that do best in our lab have a product in place, they have revenue, or they have a significant pipeline and significant traction. They're generally between 2 and 5 years old, and they've generally raised anywhere between $1 and $3 million, and then they're looking to raise anywhere between $1 and $5 million. And so that's generally how companies do best. We have, from a revenue standpoint, companies that are at the six-figure mark in terms of annual revenue to just over $1 million. And sometimes we've seen companies actually hit the $1 million mark when they're actually in the lab. So that's what we generally look at, and then we take everything case by case and on a relative basis, because we receive a lot of applications. This year we received 2,000 applications, actually for this cohort, and that would be, I think, 3,500 applications for the year for 20 slots. And so I joke around that it's easier to get into Harvard than it is our lab, but that's what we generally look for.
Oh, wonderful. And congratulations on the Emea launch. That's fantastic. You mentioned about, there's so many wonderful things that the program is offering. You're mentioning like capital, to your point, you mentioned that could be commodity, but also connections and content. I think connections is something that it could be very tricky. We talk a lot about connections in our high-tech community. So it's okay, like, it's interesting having exposure to opportunities, exposure to people who are going to connect the dots and introduce you to clients or potential partners. And that is so critical. So could you elaborate a little bit more in terms of the connections that we enable on one hand in terms of what we provide, but also what advice do you have for startups or in general? This doesn't have to be for startups alone, for any professional. And we talk about this in the high-tech community in terms of like, how do you go about expanding those connections? It's not just quantity, right? It's about like, how do you what type of connections and mentorship and introductions do you need to be successful in this space?
So that's an excellent question. I'll start with the beginning, which is how do we help them navigate through the firm? And it really is case by case and based on what these entrepreneurs need. So we have done pilot programs at Morgan Stanley. We have become a customer of the product when those when those opportunities present themselves for the companies that come in. We have introduced these companies to our banking clients, and we have introduced them to our other partners who are also corporate clients who've helped us with the lab. We help them with subject matter expertise, research, sector research. We help them do competitive analyses, anything that they need. You name it. We almost, the only thing we don't do, I think, is literally code for them. We help them hire. We help interview candidates. And so we really use the breadth of the platform to help them meet their business objectives so that they can achieve outcomes while they're in the lab that resonate with the investor community. The biggest thing with respect to the investor community is that we bring investors through the program at all times. Investors, believe it or not, again, around solving this problem that relates to the inequality in funding, investors want to diversify their portfolio. And they've mentioned that they can't find these types of investors, or the risk associated with not having these people in their networks and therefore being able to do the proper diligence on them is too great. And so having the credibility and the stamp of a Morgan Stanley as an investor in these companies is hugely important for the investor community. And they have leaned in, if you will, into the companies that not only come into our cohort, but even make it to the finalist round, because they know that we've done the work and they can trust the basic diligence that's been done with respect to Morgan Stanley. And so that's kind of question number one. And then in terms of, and I have to apologize, it's very sustainable here in the London office, and so the lights go in and out. So I'll apologize here. There's no activity. So very sustainable. It's wonderful. It makes me very happy.
Special effects. I like it, Alice. It's good.
Except when we're doing a discussion, yes.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I would say in terms of advice, the networking is the biggest part. You are as kind of helpful and important or whatever as your or strong as your networks. And so what we offer, here we go. And so what we offer to our cohorts is to just shamelessly network and make sure that they are asking for what they need. And they not only ask the people who may or may not be helpful, but they're also able to send their networks through those questions. So a lot of the questioning becomes around, hi, you can't necessarily help me, but can you introduce me to XYZ and XYZ and XYZ? And it's that next question that goes forward that helps to extend the network. Because people generally want to be helpful. It just so happens that they might not be able to be helpful to you right that second. And I would say the same thing just in terms of how we all extend our networks, quite frankly. Anyone that you meet can be potentially helpful, maybe not right at that second, but instead of looking at people, how you can help me right now, the mantra that exists, and you see other advice where it says, maybe you can be helpful to said person, is always a good strategy. But I think the more people that you come across, the more people that you can meet and make those connections, the more that you can be able to navigate in any type of situation, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And also you mentioned, I mean, you as you were thinking about investors and how to expose them to these startups that they might not have in their networks and they're interested in. What have you seen that investors are interested in terms of like, what are they looking for when they look to invest in early stage companies?
It really depends on the investors. And so you have now in the early stage community, before you would have Series A investors, so investors who wrote $1 million checks plus, and then you wouldn't have investors who invested in companies who needed like $500,000 or $250,000, which we call the seed or the pre-seed level. You see a lot of money in that space now because there's a dearth of opportunity. And so you have the ability to get to know companies earlier, take smaller bets, and then have them grow. You also see a lot more founders and operators who have exited companies and they have smaller funds, and this is where they choose to be involved. With respect to the larger checks, they like to, or Series A investors, Series B plus investors, they really want to see, and it depends again on the stage, they really want to see, if you're a Series B investor, you want to see the beginnings of scale. A Series A investor, you want to see product market fit. So you're starting to have a product, you have customers, and you can now begin to target what those customers look like and develop and replicate a sales strategy that with this money, we can replicate the sales strategy and begin to organize around scale and begin to turn that sales strategy over and over again. And you know that if you meet this particular customer with this particular strategy, you're going to get that revenue. And that's how that tends to work. And so, and then the seed and pre-seed investors are looking at traction and how the momentum has started to play in with a particular company. They're understanding obviously what the teams look like and what the founding teams bring to the table in terms of skill sets, as well as ability and ownership of said problem to solve, to bring a solution to it. And so I would say most generally that's what they're looking at. And then you have investors who have specific themes that they look towards, whether it's enterprise or consumer or specific sectors. You see a lot of those themes as well.
Wonderful. You know, a topic that is just switching gears a little bit to talk a little bit about opportunities in terms of like, we often discuss, you know, that what is the impact of the Hispanic and Latinx economy? And according actually to the US Latino GDP, it was about, like, I believe, $2.6 trillion of the US GDP, which is literally very large compared to one of the largest economies in the world. Now, from that, it's like roughly like $1.7 trillion of spending power, right? And we Latinos and Hispanic, the community, we know that we are big consumers. You know, the moment that people start doing better and so forth, then we go for the houses, we go for the cars, helping the families, helping the communities, starting businesses, creating jobs for the community, etc. Right? However, it doesn't, as much consumers that we are, we don't necessarily all the time become investors. So what advice do you have? What things do you recommend that professionals or like to this community overall should look at to learn? To either like also be in this space by becoming a mentor, by being on a board of one of these startups, for example, or even like investing, whether it is directly on a startup company or maybe on a fund.
Got it. I think for anyone who's looking to invest, I think it would be good to put yourself in those ecosystems. And so that's the first thing, to kind of get a feel for what's out there, get a feel for what's interesting to you, what's not. There are angel groups abound galore these days, whether it's through your university or through your business school or law school or wherever, whether it's through different affinity programs. You have programs like Golden Seed, you have the things that Stanford is doing, you have all types of different affinities, Indian founders, Black founders, women founders, founders. I know a group that is looking at founders in the Southeast, women founders in the Southeast. And so you can find a lot of connections to affinity programs who have angel groups, because this particular group has also grown a lot and mobilized a lot, so that you can have groups of angels come together on one ticket and invest in a company, which is helpful to the companies. And so to figure out what is going on in your space. So the more you can be part of these groups and see who pitches and how they do it and what the if you will, the themes are looking like, that's one way to get yourself involved. And then you start to think about, okay, where do I want to be helpful to these companies? I would say if it's your first time investing, you don't want to be in a round where you have to put $100,000 to work, because again, you may never see that money again. So you want to start slow, and you want to start with smaller check sizes. I would say anything between 10 and 25,000 is probably what makes sense. And then you get a feel for, again, the types of companies you like to see, the types of pitches you like to see, the types of information that particularly the angel groups request. Some request more information than others. And then that's how you learn. That's how you learn, and that's how you become more involved in the space. And then you decide how much deeper you'd like to go. And so you can put more money into angel groups. You can also start to speak to earlier stage investors. There are a lot of funds that are being created at the earlier stage now who are looking for individual LPs. So if you have someone who's raising a $10 million fund in your midst, perhaps you can put your $100,000 to work there as an example, or even more, quite frankly. So there are many different ways to get involved. And I would say the university systems and those angel groups that come from there, they have more of a regimented approach to the investment process, where you can cut your teeth and learn a little bit and then go from there.
Wonderful. Alice, I just noticed, there's like so much more to cover, and it's just going to end up like just being a short conversation. So I'll ask you a couple of more questions just to plug in two key initiatives that we have as part of your group, and then I'll open it up to questions to the group. So be ready for any questions that you might have. You might raise your digital hand, and then you can also ask the question directly. The two topics, Alice, is about like the next level fund, right? That is something that it was also like a massive accomplishment, that you were also part of that initiative. Can you tell us a little bit more about the fund? What are the companies that are like in the fund, and who is it for? And just give us some context about it.
Absolutely. The Next Level Fund was established, actually, we did our first close in late June, and it is a $50 million GPLP structure that is investing in founders at the Series A and B levels. So a little bit more mature than the companies who come into the innovation lab, but still very early stage. Our LPs at this moment are Morgan Stanley, Hearst, Microsoft, and Walmart, and we are speaking to a few other LPs to close them as well. And we are making investments in companies that are in those areas: fintech, media, software, as well as retail and commerce. And so we're very excited about this fund because it builds on what we've been doing in the Multicultural Innovation Lab. It was born out of the work that we had been doing with our partners, and the idea was like, hey, can we do more? Can we write bigger checks and get this done? And the answer is yes. And so, again, proving out the thesis for inclusive investing, inclusive innovation, we want this to be a fund that spurs fund 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and grows, because that is really the hypothesis that we're trying to prove out. And again, bring more money into the space and really level the playing field for these founders.
Wonderful. And we'll be sharing some resources on the chat as well as so that you can find out more information about the Innovation Lab, as well as like the Next Level Fund. And I also want to do a plug for like what we have, Access and Opportunity podcast. So tell us about it, Alice.
The Access and Opportunity podcast is our crown jewel from a marketing standpoint, and it's Access and Opportunity with Carla Harris. You can find it on the iTunes store or wherever you get your streaming podcast from. It's a wonderful podcast that we have done now for several seasons that really speaks to the access to capital opportunities for people of color. And we talk about it from a government standpoint, we talk about it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, we talk about it even from a policy standpoint, and how we think about this whole idea around access to capital, inclusive innovation, who are the folks that have done it, how do we create playbooks? Carla Harris, who is the voice of the podcast, really is putting through the notion of creating playbooks so that everyone can understand how certain founders have done it, certain asset managers have done it, as well as how cities and other municipalities think through access to capital and access to capital for people of color and women. And so we're very, very proud of it. It is an award-winning podcast. We have won several Mark Carm Awards and the coveted Webby. So we are very, very proud of that podcast and the stories that we bring to life and the subject matter that we bring to life to this topic.
And I see on the chat, Anna, thank you so much. There are some resources, so I really encourage everyone to please just look into it. Links to the Innovation Lab for those who want to find out more about the timing, the offerings, and mainly also how you can apply for it, as well as the Next Level Fund and Access and Opportunity podcast with Carla Harris. So I'll open it up for questions to the audience. If you can just raise your digital hand, and maybe we can just help me, Viviana, identify a few more people, and with that we can see who has the first question. How do we raise the digital hand? So we have, I think you have to go to reactions, if you see that.
Or if folks just want to kind of jump in, feel free.
That too, yeah.
You have a couple of hands raised.
I see Angel. So let's go with Angel, and Benny, you go next.
All right. So first of all, I want to thank you, Alice, and thank you, Ivana, for hosting this. This is great. I'm part of Morgan Stanley's National Diversity and Inclusion Council, and met Alice a couple of years ago where she presented in New York to us. And so it's come a long way in a couple of years, Alice. So thank you for all of the work that you have done with this and moving it forward at such a fast pace. And so what question I had for you is about 2 weeks ago, we attended with some of the HITEC colleagues here, the Latitude Conference, which was, we were proud to sponsor at Morgan Stanley, which highlighted some of the efforts, Ivana mentioned in the Latino community specifically. That's what HITEC's all about the entrepreneurship and the spirit that we have, right? But we're relatively small, right? And a lot of the themes at the conference from entrepreneurs and everything themselves were saying that, everybody says at the high level, like on Sand Hill Road or somewhere, at the different big firms, that we can't find anybody. We don't know it, right? You guys have obviously broken that barrier, right? And then said with Carla Harris, no, we know where to find you because we're in non-traditional schools, like, the Ivy League schools. We're in New Mexico, we're in Texas A&M, we're at, San Jose State or different other colleges where there's these huge opportunities with Latinos and Latinas, who are actually crushing it. So my question to you is, how do we get this message out that what we're doing as thought leaders out to the bigger ecosystem, right? What are the efforts that we can make to do that, either through HITEC or the organizations that you see, so that we can broaden the playground for access to capital to make it more mainstream, right? As opposed to just like only you guys are doing it or this, it's little pockets. What do you see in those channels?
So I think one of the major ways that we've been able to get the message out is to highlight winners, for lack of a better term, because everyone wants to be associated with winners, and and like here are examples and case studies that we just flushed through the system. Videos like the one effectively that we just did. Yes, on the one hand, we're shamelessly plugging our lab. Of course we are. That's the point. But on the other hand, you get to see actually the impact. You hear from these founders. They really are changing industries, disrupting industries. And I think it's that tangibility and bringing it to the ground that gets the message out even more. And in a way that's not philanthropic, and that has its own space, by the way, and it has its own lane that's also very important, but in a way that shows how more attention in the space and more capital to the space creates more opportunities for companies to win, for founders to win. One thing that we do, particularly in our lab, is bring in founders who have tapped the capital markets, who have raised in excess of $40 million. And not only do they help our lab companies, but they get out to their own networks as well. And so the more that you can find people to plug and play in different networks and really have the case studies and the sound bites to put through to say, hey, this is a theme that's a winner, then you get more attention. At least that's one woman's point of view.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Alice. I saw a question from Benny.
Hey, Alice, are you really allowed to have that much fun in your job? Is that permitted? See a big smile coming from you.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, quick question. So entry into the program seems pretty stiff for the majority of small businesses, I would say, right? And with the big job exodus, et cetera, the rate of people trying to start up businesses is increasing significantly. Is there anything that Morgan Stanley is thinking about doing for the smaller businesses?
It's an excellent question. So we do have a supplier diversity program, and that is led by, and I see her on the call, Shindora Pridgen. And we work very closely with Shindora to figure out how we can do our part with respect to smaller businesses, particularly as they interface with Morgan Stanley, or how to pick up the tools that they need to be able to grow and potentially work with firms that have supplier diversity programs. And so that's what we do. We have dabbled in and around the space with respect to small business. There are some, here we go. Sorry about this, everyone, but this sustainability, it's fantastic. And so we have dabbled in and around the space around small business, but trying to find a way that we can do it that's better or more innovative than what you see at the commercial banks is still something we're wrapping our hands around. So we want to make sure we do it in a way that's organic to us and is truly impactful. And so Shindora and our team spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we can actually get that done.
Yes, and shouts out to Shindora for the amazing work. I think we'll invite her some other time to talk a little bit more about it. But thank you so much. Do we have any
Shindora,
other?
we got you.
We have a question from the chat if you want me to go ahead and share it out.
Yeah, before we go into the chat, actually, just since I have like one, I didn't have a chance to talk about the Senior Multicultural Leadership Conference, Alice. So that's also another initiative that we have here at Morgan Stanley, that it's also in complements the other initiatives that we just discussed. So Alice, why don't you give us an overview of what's the goal of that Senior Multicultural Leadership Conference? When does it happen? Who is it for? And what are the outcomes of that initiative?
Yeah, so the Senior Multicultural Leaders Conference is a conference that we're also very proud of. And believe it or not, is the marquee event for the most senior executives of color in financial services, corporate, asset management at this point, you name it, and it's there. Why? Because nothing existed when we started this in 2016 at this point. And so the idea here was to have a general business conference that talked about general themes. It is not, quote unquote, the diversity conference. And we put it together so that we could convene the most senior folks of color in a way that they're able to interact with each other and do deals in a room. But also we created topics that talked about general business themes as seen through a multicultural lens, which provides a different perspective. And so with the popularity of this conference, that also, quite frankly, allows our colleagues to interact with folks that they may not necessarily know as well, we've been able to touch on a lot of different topics and even begin to include non-multicultural people. So now it's becoming, believe it or not, a business conference. And that's the whole point. That is the whole point. And so we're very proud of the turn, if you will, or the shift in the attendance that it's taken, and very proud of the subject matter, because we talk about all of those issues that are on the minds of senior executives, CEOs, CFOs, C-suite boards, but also weave in some topics that may be a little bit more touchy, but need to speak about, including representation and social issues. When we had Black Lives Matter in summer 2020, that's where we go. And we have it once a year, last Thursday in June, and whatever date that is, we will be having it this year, next year actually. So that's what it will be.
Wonderful.
The last Thursday in June.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. So we have 3 minutes, so I think we can maybe take one more last question, Vivian. I think you had one more, and then we can just wrap it up, because I know that there's so many activities that are happening in London. I just want to be respectful of all this time.
Sure. Let's jump in. So this question comes from Mauro Ibarra. Can you give 1 or 2 examples of the startups that have gone through around early stage startup with no revenue and a more mature startup? What were some of the differentiators that helped them get into the program?
Yes. So we had one very early stage startup who it was a diversity and inclusion startup that was using more immersive technologies to do this type of training for individuals in the workplace. And when we met the founder, this was 2 cohorts ago, when we met the founder, she was still in business school, graduating, and we were like, wow, this is super early. But what we noticed was she had significant traction. She had already gotten into several large tech companies, and a lot of it was because this company was her research project. And so she was able to begin to test with these companies, and they were starting to begin to renew or basically start paying. And so we said, oh, this one could be very, very interesting. So we took her into the lab, knowing that we would have to start from literally point A, like how do you even set things up, etc. The good news is she's super smart, and she was at Stanford Business School. And then we had the events of summer 2020. And that really opened people's eyes to what they could be doing in diversity and inclusion. The companies that she had pilot programs into all renewed immediately. And she was going to raise $1.5 million. We thought that was pretty good. That'd be her first raise. She raised 3, and she has since raised $15 million. And so what's really interesting about the lab was before she came in, investors were circling. It all sounded fantastic, but as I mentioned to you, she was in school. And so you think about the team and et cetera. And then once we came into the cap table, they said, oh, okay, there's something here. And then as soon as the company started to pay for the training, they came in immediately. And so she was completely oversubscribed, and then she's been able to really take off, and here comes a $15 million raise that she just closed several weeks ago. So that's one instance where you said, okay, there's proven traction, the revenue maybe small to non-existent, but it was very interesting to see who were the clients and where they were in their life cycle with that particular company. So that's one. Then we have another one who is, they're doing data analytics software on-prem. And so the idea is to create insights and analytics that can be done off of the cloud. And they were pretty mature. I wouldn't say pretty mature. They were probably ready for Series A, $1 million+ in revenues, but they knew exactly how Morgan Stanley could be helpful to them. And a lot of it was around best-in-class work with respect to our tech practice and our tech franchise, as well as introductions into those companies who, mostly industrials, who could use this particular product. And they zeroed in directly on that. We helped them, obviously, with some of their operations. The CEO needed a little bit of founder development and refinement, if you will, because he's a tech person who really can't speak and it speaks forever and all the way at the, at the ground floor. We're like, you need to come up, we need some presence, give you some gravitas. So we helped him with that. And there's always something. So whether the companies are, just out of the gate or have a couple $1 million, they're still very, very early, as we all know here in this group. And so there's always something that we can help with, including the easy stuff, which is, okay, we'll make the introductions and the technology speaks for itself, but also some of the harder stuff, which is like, no one believes you when you speak. You're going to need to work on your gravitas. So that's the fun stuff. That's where we really enjoy working with these companies. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Maro, for your question as well, and everyone. And I really appreciate it. We're going to go and post again, like just those links and resources. I really appreciate any additional comments or feedback. Alice, we can wrap it up. I want to thank you again for joining us here in the HITEC community. You are part of the familia now, so please come over of any new things or initiatives that you have. Here you have really like a community that's always going to be supportive of this environment, and we're ready to just pretty much get our hands on in terms of like contributing and participating in these activities. So thank you, Alice. I don't know if there's any final thoughts or comments you want to leave us with.
So thank you so much, Ivana, for having me. Thank you to the HITEC community for having me and listening to what I could talk about all night, quite frankly. And again, if anyone wants to be involved, just please raise your hands. We'd be happy to figure out how we can work collaboratively. So thank you again for the time. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Ivana. And thank you, Morgan Stanley, for sharing with us. This has been amazing. Congratulations on the new initiative and the impact that you've had so far and will continue to have in this space. And thank you for sharing how entrepreneurs can tap into this resource, right? Not just capital, but priceless resource as well as content and connections, which, it's the gift that keeps on giving. And so I'll emphasize the podcast as well, because I'm a big podcaster. So Access and Opportunity is the podcast. And Alice, thank you for joining us from London. And Ivana, thank you for your time in leading the conversation. So with that, we'll close out. But if you want to stick around, we will be here and continue chatting. So thank you, everybody.